Good evening, very good night if you're in Europe, or good morning if you're Asia. Today was the first beautiful day in New York with 22 Celsius or 70 Fahrenheit either way, and birds were singing in Central Park. It was a positive day. Optimism is out there. I got my first COVID shot. So I'm going to tell you that this story is sad in the beginning, but it will get better towards the end. So let's roll. So what I'm going to talk about today is, first of all, how was the industry before pandemic? And then we are going to focus on the issue of the impact. What was the impact of COVID-19 on the industry? And from there, we look at some of the tourism and travel recovery scenarios. So let's look at the industry before COVID-19. So basically, how did it look like in 2019? So huge industry. In terms of revenues, export revenues, tourism is an export business, 1.7 trillion in 2019, which is the second largest industry in the world after oil and gas. And it counted 6.8% of the world exports and 28.3% of global services. And what is interesting, 50% of total exports from some small developing countries. So some countries, smaller countries, are very dependent on tourism. Take the Caribbean, take Greece, Italy, Spain. And there was a huge, almost $1 trillion capital investment, which was 4.3% of total investment globally. And it contributed 10.3% of global GDP, which translates into 8.9 trillion. And it was growing faster than the world economy overall in 2019. There were 1.5 billion international tourist arrivals, and it was the 10th consecutive year of sustained growth after the Great Recession. The industry, travel and tourism, employed 330 million people. And what is interesting, there was a high share of women, so 54% of the workforce, and also a disproportionate number of young people. So there has been trends taking place before the COVID, and these trends accelerated. So based on McKinsey study, what has happened in terms of these trends, in terms of acceleration, one is proliferation of analytics and disruptive tech. So technology, as we all know, based on Zoom, everything else, contactless travel, was speeding up. And that shift to digital and mobile was accelerating. There was also a lot in terms of considerations of environmental impact. And of course, well-being services and shifts in food and beverage towards the healthy way of eating. So that was that. But what happened to the industry? By the end of 2020, in terms of export revenues, they dropped 1.3 trillion. So we were down to 0.4, which is a drop of 76.5% versus the end of 2019. I don't know any other industries which in a year was wiped out so badly as travel and tourism was, minus 76.5. And the international arrivals were down to 500 million and versus at 1 billion, which means a drop of 74%. And there was a job loss of about 120 million, and so the industry shrank to 210 million direct jobs versus the 330. So major impact. And it wasn't even, so it was not around 70% across all categories. As you saw, the export revenues were down minus 82%, international arrivals minus 74%, jobs minus 36%. But the interesting point was short-term rentals like Airbnb were down only minus 6%. And the reason being that a lot of people started to travel domestically. They felt that it's safe to stay in the quarters that you control rather than a bigger hotel. So the occupancy rates, according to STR, were down 28%. Seat capacity for domestic airline, 38%. Hotel searches were down 47%, similar to hotel bookings, down 47%. and international seat capacity was down -62. So international air travel was hit harder than the domestic, and the tourist arrivals 72. So there was a prediction January, October. United Nations World Tourism Organization was looking into the impact, estimating what will be the impact, and so far January, October, it was not even. So the hardest hit areas, you remember the pandemic goes in waves, where Asia, the Pacific -82, followed by Middle East -73, and then Africa -69, Europe and Americas -68. But again, you know, since those days, Asia has come back. Okay, just to compare this pandemic to the previous ones. So SARS 2003, the arrivals went down 2 million, which was 0.4%. And then when we had the global economic crisis 2009, the decline was 37 million, which equals to -4%. But when the COVID hit, so we came down harsh. So 1 billion arrivals we were down 1 billion, and -70 to 75%. So never, this industry has never seen such a drastic hit like what we did 2020. So what about then the impact on US economy? Based on today's statistics, GDP is down 3.5% versus the same day 2020. GDP growth is estimated for this year to be 3.7%. And the employment at pre-COVID level probably by 2024, and it will continue growing since that 2024, but we will reach that level of pre-COVID. Just some other stats, you know, unemployment in April 20 was 14.8%, that was the peak. And so in April, it was a disaster. So it increased 10.3% from March, translated into 23.1 million people in US losing jobs. So the annual unemployment 2020 was 8.1% versus 3.7% in 2019. And unemployment has improved. Currently in January, we were standing at 6.3%. Personal consumption was down -2.74. So even if we lost a lot of jobs, the stimulus helped people to spend money. Even the expenditures changed. You know, we all know we went online for purchasing things. We started to invest in our homes, and then, you know, if we got food from a restaurant, it was delivered or picked up. So the total retail and food sales were hit harder than personal consumption. So really, it was targeted close to 20% decline. So US economy, if you look at the dip that we had in April, so in 2020, the non-farm payroll employment were down -5.8%, and it's predicted to grow +1.8% 2021. So there was a drastic drop, and as I said, 2024, we should reach the level that we had 2019. Now, consumers' assessment of national economy, which is a very important part too, in terms of how do these consumers think the economy will be and how will they be, is an important one. And National Restaurant Association did a survey recently, and as you can see, from January 2020, where 43% thought that you know, the economy was excellent or good, it went down in April to 70%. It's been coming back slowly. And January this year, 15 through 17, it was 23% who thought it was excellent. But the majority thought it was fair or poor. And but it's not as bad as April, so we come down from 83% thinking it's fair or poor down to 77%. Now, Disposable personal income is also an interesting story because there was a growth of 2.2% 2019, but 2020 we actually saw much bigger growth, 6.4%, which is explained based on the stimulus and the support for consumers. So disposable personal income was not hit harder, and United States is one of those economies where 75, sometimes 80% of GDP is based on personal consumption. And you can see the first quarter of 21, the stimulus that was decided in December hit growth, and it was definitely, you could see that there was a peak, as well as there was the second quarter a peak in terms of personal income. So the consumption potential is there. Consumers have also saved a lot because they haven't been able to travel. So there is this opportunity for pent-up demand in the future, and I will address that a little bit later. So Oxford Economics did a study for American Hotel and Lodging Association comparing 9/11, the recession through 07 through 09, and then this was a preliminary scenario for COVID-19. So this was done in March 2020. So what happened in 9/11, we lost 400,000 jobs in the hotel industry, and the occupancy was around 60%. And then when we get into recession, the Great Recession, the job loss a little bit bigger, so 470,000 jobs, and the occupancy was hit a little bit harder, so it came down to 54% from close to 60. But the COVID, we're dealing with totally different scene. Occupancy is hovering at 25%, and this was now March, and that was the prediction. And job loss is between 2.8 to 3.4 million jobs. Not anymore 500,000, but 2.8 to 3.4 million. So the devastation was totally in a different category. So if we then look into key performance indicators and compare the markets between USA and Europe, EU, and the full year between 2020 and 2019. So RevPAR was hit in USA minus 68.5%, Europe suffered more, minus 72.7%. Total RevPAR, which is the total expenditure revenue per available room, not just the room rate, was hit a little bit less, 68.3, and Europe minus 70%. Labor cost per available room reduced, minus 52% in USA and about 49% in Europe. So yes, you lost revenue, but you were able to compensate some of that by lower labor costs when hotels closed and laid off and furloughed people. Gross operating profit per available room was hit hard, minus 30.7%. And in Europe, it went negative, over 101.1%. So there was a loss, significant loss per available room. So that was the story in terms of USA versus Europe. And now, just today, I received the results from STR. Where are we today? And the occupancy in USA is 49%, ADR average 98, so RevPAR 48. And if you look at this, the hardest hit in terms of occupancy are the luxury and upper upscale hotels. And economy hotels have done fairly well throughout the pandemic. I saw some weeks in January where they were actually above January 2019 numbers. So you know, that's overall, the economy and extended stay have done better than the industry overall. And just to tell you, last week, the week before this one, total US occupancy was 47%. So yes, the industry is coming back. But just to give you an idea, where are we relative to pre-pandemic? We are still down. So if we compare the same week, February 28 to March 6, between 2020 and 21, you know, this was not yet at the time in 2020. We were not hitting the hard end of March, April in terms of the hotel industry. So we are down total occupancy by about 20% for the US. ADR is down about 22%, and RevPAR down about 38%. And here you can see what I mentioned earlier. Luxury is still minus 51% below the occupancy level. But it's interesting, the ADR, this is the first week that I saw the ADR is actually reaching in the luxury category the level that was the case in 2020. So there is some rate recovery. So upper upscale is down minus 48%, and ADR is still 25% down. Upscale 24% down occupancy-wide and ADR-wide. Upper mid-scale down 15 occupancy and 17 ADR. Mid-scale 11.6 below occupancy level a year ago, and ADR is about 10% below. And here you can see the economy. It's only behind 4.8% in terms of occupancy, and ADR is down 5.1%. And independent hotels have been suffering occupancy losses about close to 17% and 14% in ADR. And just to give you an idea, I went upstate to Catskills, and on the New York State Thruway 87, I saw only a couple hotels that had taken down the brands. You know, there are a concentration of those hotels, which are mainly mid-scale economy hotels. So just observing that there are a few who have closed, but we'll look at more closely the situation in New York City. All right, so what happened in New York City? The city job loss was 878,000. And if you take third quarter unemployment, average was 8.5, but there are certain industries that were hit really hard, such as actors, dancers, as you can see, 52, 55%, musicians, 27% unemployed, waiters, 19, retail sales, 13. So leisure and hospitality had, 2020, 249,000 jobs, and it's down from 466,000 in 2019, so almost half. And occupancy in October was 40% in New York City, when it was 92% in October 2019. Typical high peak demand due to the fashion week and UN. Out of the 700 hotels, 200 had closed, and out of those 500 left, 63 were for homeless people, sheltering homeless people. Real estate sales tax went down 59 billion from 100 billion in 2019, and sales tax was down minus 5.6% to 438 million. So industry was hit hard. And here you see what the New York City looked like prior to the pandemic. And the hotel industry occupancy 2019 was 87.5, ADR 285, giving us a RevPAR, revenue per available room, 249. Now, end of 2020, the occupancy was 40%, and the ADR was down $150 to $135, resulting in RevPAR of 54. And and you can see the total number of room nights sold. So there has been growth until 2019. So if we then look into the area of visitation, number of visitors coming to New York City. So it was a banner year for New York City, 66.6 million visitations and 47.4 billion economic impact. 2020 saw 22.9 million visitations, so decline of 66%, and NYC company is predicting 38 million visitations for this year, which is a growth of 37%. And the breakdown up to 2018, you can see how out of the 65 million visitations in 2018, international were 13.6 and 51.5 were domestic. And it was 21% was business and 79 leisure. So this number that we have here, 2020, 22.9 million visitations, is mainly driven by domestic demand. So with these restrictions that we have in place, inhibited international visitors to come to New York City. So what about then US restaurants? So National Restaurant Association provided some data. So by December of 2020, 87% of full-service restaurants reported an average of minus 36% decline in sales by December of 20. By December of 20, over 110,000 restaurants closed permanently or long-term. And between March and October 20, over 130 billion losses in sales. And by November of 20, over 2.1 million jobs were lost in the restaurant industry. And currently, 22 states allow 100% restaurant capacity to be used. So 22 states out of 50 have no restrictions for restaurants. And New York just recently moved to the 50% capacity from 35. So some other information regarding the consumers, are they comfortable eating? So a survey by Civic Science, just March of this year, 53% of US consumers are comfortable eating at restaurants. And the same company in February find out that 37% of US consumers were planning to eat the following week in a restaurant. And the orders by NPD group in terms of orders at sit-down restaurants were down still at 37% on February 21st this year. So there is still room for recovery for the restaurant industry. So what about New York City restaurants pre and during COVID? So in 2019, we had 23,650 establishments, which created 317,800 jobs and generated 10.7 billion in wages and nearly 27 billion in taxable sales. And there has been a great growth in the restaurant sector in New York City since Great Recession. So from 2009 to 2019, jobs grew 61% and number of establishment grew 44%, which was double the overall rate of growth for jobs and new businesses in New York City. So it was the engine of growth in the city. And the restaurant sector created 1 in 12 private sector jobs and establishment. And about 60% of New York City restaurant workers were immigrants in 2018, compared to 45% across all occupations. So yes, this American dream has often started for immigrants to start working in restaurants. But by September of last year, employment was only 55% of the level of February 20. So we lost about 142,000 jobs. And as a result, when 33% of restaurants and 50% of bars closed. So how does it look like for New York City in terms of the tourism industry? So New York City has recovered, from 9/11, from Great Recession. We saw some of the statistics earlier. And the recovery is estimated to start mid-2021. But in order to reach the pre-pandemic level, it will take until 2025. And that's mainly because the restrictions on travel, especially for the international tourists. And also people are hesitant to visit big cities. And New York City in March, April was the epicenter of the pandemic. I mean, the pictures of mass graves in Bronx and things like that don't really encourage people to come at the time to New York City. And also, we have, I mean, the reasons to come to New York City is often related to the dining scene, to the entertainment, the Broadway shows, the culture, and just the action in the city. And I have to say, though, I visited my daughter in the village, and I was walking around 8:30 on Sunday to the subway, and Thompson Street, almost every restaurant had their outdoor seating going on, even it was about freezing temperature. And so there was a lot of action. So I think and I believe the New York City tourism industry will be back. Okay, now let's see, next. All right, so what are some of the scenarios then for the recovery? So here is a GDP prediction. So 2021, the world will see about 5.5% growth in GDP, USA 4.3, EU 4.2, China 8.1, emerging markets 6.3. This growth will continue, but not so strong in 2022, as you can see here. But still, the world is expected to grow 4.2, USA 3.1, EU 3.6, China 5.6, and emerging markets 5%. So here is a prediction that was done in October 2020, and it was pretty close to what actually happened. But as you can see, there were scenarios. The worst scenario was minus 78% decline in terms of international arrivals, and the most positive was minus 58. So we hit that 74% decline. So the question is, when will the recovery start for the international tourism industry? And as you can see here, we were tracking, there was no way, these scenarios could happen that we were predicting in terms of October. So we were down. But estimation out there based on United Nations World Tourism Organization, and it takes 2.5 to 4 years to get those record levels of international tourism arrivals. And you can see a couple scenarios here. The V-shaped recovery, is it sharp V, scenario 1, or scenario 2, sort of a more leveled, or scenario 3. And I have to say, I'll get back to that, but it will be uneven. So if this is the global picture, it will be uneven recovery based on region, based on companies and type of operations they have. So based on the UNWTO panel, the estimation is that first quarter, so these are experts in tourism and travel. So when do you expect a rebound in international tourism in your country? And majority, 50%, said that it's going to be the first quarter of 2022. And as you can see here, Q4 we'll see some growth for international tourism. So overall, it's probably there at the end of the Q4 and the beginning of Q1 when the international tourism will return. And so what about then, when do we reach the pre-pandemic levels? The majority of the people think it's either 23 or 24 or after. Nobody thinks we get there this year. Only 15% think that we'll get there on 22. So just recently, the consulting company or the analyst group called Baird Equity Research, March 9th, concluded in terms of global hotel brands recovery. So these are the Hiltons, Marriott's, Hyatt's, Choice Hotels. So their estimation is that pent-up demand will begin to be realized in second quarter of 21, especially on the leisure front. And 22 could be a more normal year, and which compares to prior expectations of 23 being the first normal year. So optimism, I mean, if you look at these prior predictions from the end of 2020, there is more optimism of faster recovery, and that is because of vaccinations and herd resistance. Okay, another study looking into the US hotel industry, and based on these experts, they predict that this is done by STR, Smith Travel Research, so they expect hotel demand return to pre-pandemic by 23 and ADR return on 25. I have to say though that by looking at these weekly reports, and as we saw already, that the luxury hotels are basically, they have already reached this past week the same ADR level that they had a year ago. So this might be faster for the ADR to return. It might be 2024. But again, it's dependent on markets. Some markets are dependent on business travel, conferences, and so that will make a difference. So in February, the US leisure and hospitality sector added 355,000 jobs, but we were still down 3.5 million from February of 2020. And as you saw earlier, the full recovery of these jobs will take until 24. And the sector shed more than 500,000 jobs in December and January. And unemployment in the sector was still 15.9% in January versus 6.3 US average. So we are a very hard hit industry. What about then cross-travel bookings? So experts predict that it will happen. You know, when do you expect cross-travel bookings? Airlines, hotels, car rental return to pre-pandemic, so it will be 24 or later. So there are barriers. Why doesn't it happen this year? First of all, travel restrictions for international travel. There have been tryouts for travel corridors. It's not really working. I mean, countries like UK, Finland just closed down Monday for 3 weeks, and we used to allow people to come from Estonia. Many people came from Estonia, Tallinn to Helsinki to work. In service sector, now lockdown. Slow virus containment is an issue. I mean, we all know that, for instance, European Union, they negotiated hard to get lower rates, but they lost 3 months, and now there is a shortage of vaccine. And of course, when we deal with developing countries who can't afford the vaccine, they are supported by COVAX and other non-profit that will give them, but it will take time. There's low consumer confidence. You know, there's that psychological effect that the consumer doesn't feel confident that if I stay in a hotel, I go to a restaurant, that I don't get the COVID-19. The economic environment, there's the uncertainty. You saw some of the stats before, that people are not, even if they have money and savings, they don't feel comfortable spending, splurging, because on travel and tourism, eating out. And then there is lack of coordinated response. Now we're dealing with countries like Israel, Austria, trying to come up with the green passport, so that if you get vaccinated, then you can travel between those two countries. So, but there is no EU-wide initiative, no WHO initiative on that. And then a slow flight resumption. Airlines are careful adding routes, adding capacity, because business travel is not yet back, and there has been changes in the behavior of business travelers. They get used to using Zoom, and they think twice if they're going to travel, and also many companies have slashed their travel budgets. Then let's look at how will this happen. So according to McKinsey, the recovery is dependent on proximity, travel reason, and sector. So earlier recovery happens for regional travel, can be completed in personal or rented vehicle. Then comes the domestic travel by air, and then international travel, air travel. And that's dependent on government regulations. The reason for travel, in-person sales or client meetings and essential business operations will come first. And then internal meetings, training programs, other small group gatherings, and slowest recovery happens in industry conferences, trade shows, exhibitions, and events. Sector-wise, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, construction has an earlier recovery, followed by tech, real estate, finance, and energy. Healthcare, education, and professional services, it will take longer to recover. Then if we look at the lodging type, based on Skift and PricewaterhouseCoopers, so based on the lodging type, slow recovery happens for convention centers, luxury full-service hotels. Faster recovery happens for economy and extended stay, and the other upper mid-scale and upscale are there in between. Location-wide, interstate, suburban, drive to resort, small town will recover faster than urban, island resort, and airport. Demand-wise, the faster recovery happens for new contract type of demand, like healthcare workers, drive to leisure, and then the traditional contract, which is groups like airline crews, flight to leisure, corporate meeting, group leisure, and transient business will have a slower recovery. So what about travel behavior? What are the changes? Closer, you saw it already. Domestic, staycations. People stay closer to their home. Getaway, nature, rural tourism, road trips. So anything where you can be in open air. And the younger travelers are most resilient. So because they are not so exposed to COVID, and also, you know, maybe they don't have to take it so seriously. But the mature travelers and retirees will be most impacted segments because of the dangers. Now, new concerns, there's the health and safety measures and cancellation policies. Many airlines, hotels have to revise their cancellation policies. They have to be more flexible. They have to communicate that it's healthy and safe to stay at our place. Booking window has gone from 90 days to 14 days. People do last minute bookings because they don't sure if they are in good shape to travel. And of course, changes in pandemic-related events and travel restrictions. And more responsible, they give more importance to creating a positive social, environmental, and economic impact. So that has gone beyond sustainability. It's about concern for local and health issues. So there is also some interesting things happening in terms of technology. You know, in crisis, the innovations can accelerate. So fast accelerators, according to McKinsey, are those exciting replacements for in-person experiences, so contactless. Online kiosk check-in, if it's done well, guest messaging, workflow, staff collaboration tools, those are all fast accelerators. Potential to stick after pandemic are those new experiences with momentum and the potential to cement it in the next normal, which is keyless entry, online F&B, food and beverage ordering. It might be exciting now, but not sure if they're going to last, which is the temperature checks, track and trace software, delivery robots. Even though some of those delivery robot solutions are very economical. I mean, my students research that area, and you can lease for $3 an hour a robot to clean the room, versus over $30 an hour for unionized labor in New York City. Well, we probably return to old normal with bad online kiosk or in-room technology. Even though Hilton is very successful with their connected room, which is probably going to stay. So what about in 2021? Which are the faster and slower recoveries? So faster ones, domestic travel, slower international, leisure, faster, business slower, economy faster, conference luxury slower, short-term rentals faster, hotels slower than that. Branded hotels come back faster than independent hotels, mainly because they have all the resources to make it safe and hygiene, all those, they have the brand power. And third-party distribution in shocks like this, we saw also in 9/11, hotels need to reach out and airlines to try to get the customers, and especially less known brands. And low-cost carriers rather than network airlines, because low-cost carriers fly from A to B rather than a hub. So according to Skift, what are the themes for 2021? So it's uneven economic recovery across regions, and that is dependent on issues like what industries were hit hard, oil and gas, the whole hospitality, leisure, tourism. So that's one reason. The other reason, are we dealing with developing world or developed countries? How much, like United States is lucky because most of the demand, as you saw in the case of New York City, came from domestic travel. So then the travel could look normal, but more contactless. Yes, some of these contactless things will stay. Leisure outperformed business, as you saw, and its business travel's demise is greatly exaggerated. As you saw, there are certain categories like manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, where the business travel will come. There are businesses where you need to be in person to go and make the deals. Short-term rentals, they have grown in popularity because of this notion that we can isolate ourselves with friends and family, not being exposed to, same way as in hotels. There's a lot of capital. American Airlines has announced today, 2 days ago, that they're going to raise $7.5 billion based on their American Advantage loyalty program, which generates revenue for them when they sell the points to the banks and the retailers. Delta just got $10 billion based on the same concept, United as well. So brands will consolidate. Sonesta has been very aggressive hotel brand, but the regions will fragment, and that's what I was referring earlier. It's uneven recovery. The distribution swings back to third party, as you saw. You just want the brand out there through any channel, and things will look different, but tourism and travel will return. And why? Because it is a mega trend. I mean, when countries enter the middle class, disposable income increases like China, India, there's a limit how much stuff you can buy, but experiences, especially the younger generation, they want experiences, and that will be something that is definitely keeping this as a mega trend. And we have evidence. So tourism travel industry has weathered crises before, just to name a few. Terrorism, 9/11. We had local terrorism in Hurghada in Egypt, where terrorists bombed the hotels. Natural disasters, tsunamis, hurricanes, cyclones, wildfires, earthquakes, disease, SARS, bird flu, swine flu, MERS, Zika, Ebola, and economic declines like the Great Recession. But the industry has always come out stronger for it. But we have to be honest, the current COVID-19 pandemic has delivered a major blow, bigger than any crisis over the past decades. But tourism and travel will return to growth. I have a few things, but rather than showing them to you, you can look at these. These are at World Travel and Tourism Council and United Nations World Tourism Organization website, and it's about restarting tourism, restarting travel, and the social impact of travel and tourism. The message is this: travel, tourism, these are emotional experiences, and that's the tone in this. People are missing this emotional connection, connecting with other cultures, other people, and exploring. So that's the approach that these organizations are taking and trying to restart the travel. So that's all I have to say, and thank you. Kiitos. That's my home country, Finland. Thank you. And I will be open to any questions. I know Lynn, Dr. Minard has been tracking some of the questions. So if there are any, Lynn, please.
There are indeed. We have quite a few questions come in, and thank you so much for the presentation, first of all. So let's start with the first one. This one has come from Corey, and you have addressed it in part, but maybe we can press you a bit further on it. So the question came in early and was about corporate events, and you've mentioned that it's one of the slower ones you think will return. So let me, if Corey allows me to put a brief twist on this, do you think with this, with events, with all the other things that you've mentioned, that some of the early predictions were perhaps a bit pessimistic now that we are seeing increased vaccination and it has changed so much just in the last couple of weeks? Do you think we might see the recovery happening quicker, even with the timeline than, for example, 2024, or do you think that's still a realistic estimate?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on a couple of things. One is, you know, CDC gave instructions that, you know, if you get the vaccine, you can gather with your own family, even if somebody in your family didn't have that. But any kind of bigger events are not allowed. Take places like Las Vegas. Las Vegas, these mega ballrooms, they have obeyed the rules where it's divided into 100-person areas. So there are ways, there are solutions. And but I have to say, the Consumer Electronics show in Las Vegas went online, and there are trade shows like that that can be done online. It's harder to do a car, even though now we have you know, virtual reality. Volkswagen has introduced a virtual reality showroom that you can actually have the Volkswagen in your space and you can explore it and all those type of technologies. But then when you really have to meet the people, you know, the small, medium-sized businesses, a lot of the marketing is done through trade shows. So I think they will come back because there is no substitute than meeting the people, touching the wares that they're selling, the products and goods, and you know, making those deals. So I think those come back, but they don't come back unless we had a herd immunity and people will comfortable going to those shows.
Yes, absolutely. Some of them are already coming back, right? Which smaller shows are coming back. It's exciting.
Yeah.
We also have a question from Marisol, who is talking about vaccination. So she's saying perhaps we will need to get this as a yearly shot, but will there be a requirement, you think, that there will be proof of vaccination necessary when someone is traveling?
Well, I'll show you this. This is the level of technology that I got today when I got my shot. It says COVID vaccination record card. I mean, there's the discussion nowadays, like I mentioned, Israel, Austria, talking about the green pass, the green passport. So, and you know, you needed evidence, you went to Africa, that you have a polio shot. So this is nothing new. And now the apps are available. And of course, I think that will make things safer. And then, but then there is the issue of discrimination. So if for your reasons, religious or other reasons, you don't want to take the shot, then it will discriminate. And but I don't see that as a big problem because, like I said, the apps are available. We already had some tracking, and it's easy to put in. You know, you have these apps for security at the airports, and that's just an additional feature to add.
Well, it's definitely something I know the family travel sector is very concerned about. Seeing kids are not necessarily going to be vaccinated very soon. Does that mean no family travel if we require vaccination? So it's a big question in the industry. Sure. Yeah,
I think it's 16 years or younger, you don't need that. Or there is no vaccine yet, but you know, adolescents can carry it, but the little babies don't necessarily. And then you're talking about family travel. I mean, the grandparents would like to see their grandchildren, and they are the risk group. So after they're vaccinated, I think that family travel will come back.
That's exactly right. I mean, we're hearing already in the travel agent community, lots of grandparents and healthcare workers are booking family trips because they're vaccinated.
Yes.
Great news. Now, Joe also had a question. he asks about how the pandemic you think will affect M&A activity, mergers and acquisitions in the hotel industry.
Well, you know, it's so interesting. I mean, who's really hit hard is the owners, you know, like Asian American Hotel Owners Association. 70% of the dates in are owned by these people, mainly from Gujarat, India. So they are hit hard because they own their properties. The big brands, not so. And then, yes, there could be deals like in New York City. You know, I've been looking at some of the deals here, but the issue is what we saw was that the economy low-end hotels decided to go and become a homeless shelter and then close forever. I mean, you're looking at investing quite a lot to get them back on standard. And honestly, some New York City hotels, some of the 200 that closed, needed to be closed because they were not competitive. Will you get deals? Usually if it's the bigger hotel group, they are well funded, and Hilton, Marriott, as soon as the pandemic became serious, they secured lifeline. You know, they make sure that they had liquidity, and they have been cutting maybe 10-20% of the headquarters staff. So really, who's been suffering is the hotel owners. So you might find some individual deals here and there, but I don't see. We didn't really see that after 9/11 or Great Recession that, you know, suddenly you have all these deals, and a lot of, I mentioned earlier, Sonesta has been one which been aggressive in terms of acquisitions.
Right. That's a great example indeed. We also have a question from Ken, who's asking about, particularly for New York City, the large union population, and whether you think that will lead to a faster entrance back into the workforce. And also, I don't know if you want to comment on this one, what do you think the future will be for the union since Peter Ward has retired?
Well, I have to say this is like personal experience. I used to go to events in Plaza, and I always like to talk to these gray-haired old men who they were so happy that they put their children, their grandchildren through great colleges because the unions protected their wages so that they could afford, you know, rather than a minimum wage, the union provided them the American dream, as I mentioned earlier. You know, they were bargaining, but I think they've been bargaining many areas themselves out. And what happens in a crisis like this, whenever the cost is prohibitive, companies look for technology for solution. So I think that's one thing, or just try to go non-unionized. So these robots I mentioned, there's so many technologies out there that can reduce the number of employees needed for housekeeping, for checking in. And we already saw that in Citizen M, self-check-in and these type of things taking place. So there's another thing. I've seen already that some hotel executives are talking about the hiring frenzy. So you laid off people, and many people are not coming back to hospitality. You know, they chose other careers. They went to online retail, and many companies like Hilton had programs helping their laid off employees to get jobs with Amazon and so on. So I think there is a group of people who will not be returning, and I think that will be an opportunity for younger people to enter the industry. And so it's not like, okay, we still are missing 3.5 million jobs. Yes, I'm sure they will come back, but to what level? But then there could be an opportunity if people left the industry for younger people. And also the cost issue, you know, if you keep a, you know, person who's been 20 years in a union, you pay premium versus somebody who's starting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, actually, that ties into a question someone else was asking. It shows as anonymous. What are your recommendations for the young people just graduating from hospitality schools looking to enter the sector? Would you say it's a fairly optimistic outlook from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, just keep in mind, you are young, and also, you know, think positive in terms of maybe it's a good idea to consider other industries which are growing now and then return to hospitality industry. So if you go, let's say, industries which use technology, well, so you can learn new skills. And the beauty of hospitality tourism industry, it's an experience industry. There are many other experience industries, healthcare, retail, and so some of those are growing, and I think it's okay to leave the industry for a while and then come back later. If you want to stick with the industry, I think what you really need to upgrade your skills is to know much more about the applications of technology. What is potential? You know, now is a good opportunity to introduce new ideas to organizations, how you can use the technology. And of course, unfortunately, our students now graduating are not able to enjoy the Hospitality Innovation Hub, but we will have that as a major player in the industry in terms of innovations and applications of technology. So that knowledge is crucial.
Right. And it might tie in, and this might be one of our last questions we can take as we're coming up to time. But again, it's an anonymous person who's saying, do you think there will be a lot of shopping around going on in terms of loyalty before and after the pandemic? So do you think travel loyalty programs will play a part or change in the recovery?
Yes, I briefly mentioned that they had to relax their rules, and they don't, you know, I don't think they will go back. For instance, United Airlines relaxed the rule that, you know, the miles expire within a year and a half. Now they don't expire. And so you're in a market situation where you need to get the demand. And one way to do that is to be flexible. As you saw, you know, the booking window is 14 days rather than 90 days. So I think the loyalty will play a big role in the future. But you have to be transparent. You have to make sure the consumer believes that you are a brand that takes care of the consumer and takes care of the employees. I mean, that's one other thing. You know, many of these people in hospitality tourism are frontline people, and they are exposed to this. So if the brand, like we had the meatpacking industry, which was in really bad shape, and many people got COVID because they didn't have the safety systems in place. So hospitality needs to have that. And as you saw, the well-being, those type of trends will accelerate. So I think the loyalty will definitely still be there. But at the end of the day, the consumer is really talking about the trust. It's not about going to stay at the hotel to collect a few points and get COVID. It's more about, can I trust this hotel? And are they doing good? I mean, are they responsible? I think this pandemic has taught us that, you know, we all suffering through this. So you need to be responsible towards your employees and customers. And I think that's really driving the loyalty.
Yes, absolutely true. I think a lot of people's priorities when they pick their travel products and services will change, as you've rightly pointed out. I think that is unfortunately all we have time for. We're right on time, right at 6. So Dr. Jukka, thank you. I'm going to let you bid everyone good night and give a closing word. Yes.
So thank you for everyone joining us today, and stay positive. I mean, this is really a serious pandemic for our industry, but we always, like I said, we come back stronger and better, and there will be opportunities. This mega trend of people traveling, spending money on experiences will never disappear. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night, good morning, good evening.